We will now be hearing our first keynote speaker. And to introduce him, let's welcome back Professor Kumar on the stage.
It's my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Dr. Edward Wayne. He has a BS in Environmental Studies from Middleborough College and a master's and PhD in ecology from the University of California at Davis. He is currently an affiliate at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory in the USA, and he is basically involved in the evaluation of energy efficiency programs, policies, and technology performance measurements for over 30 to 40 years. He has extensively contributed to the development of the California Public Utilities Commission's energy efficiency evaluation protocols, the US Department of Energy's impact evaluation framework for technology deployment programs, and the National Action Plan on Energy Efficiency Evaluation, Measurement, and Verification Guidelines. He has received Lifetime Achievement Awards from the International Energy Policy and Program Evaluation Conference and Outstanding Achievement in Marketing Research and Evaluation Award from the Association of Energy Service Professionals and Certificates of Appreciation from the IEPEC and the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol, the IPMVP organization. In 2007, as a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, he also received the Nobel Peace Prize. For the last many years, he has been working in creating a community of evaluators in Asia. He has led several evaluation workshops and was instrumental in establishing the first conference in Asia on the evaluation of energy efficiency programs and policies. And working with others, has created an organization called the Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific to support the evaluation of energy policy and programs. Dear participants, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Edward Wayne, and his presentation is titled Evaluation of Energy Programs and Policies in Asia Pacific Region, Current Status, Challenges, and Opportunities Ahead. Dr. Wayne, the floor is yours now.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Hello?
sir.
Oh, good. And can you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I listened to the remarks earlier, and I feel very honored and humbled to be here. There's a lot of comments that resonated with myself and my experience. I also went to a small college of 1,600 people in Middlebury College in Vermont, and I've been working in the field for 40 years, focusing on energy efficiency and renewable energy. The department I was at that time, there was a new department called Environmental Studies, and now it's the largest department at that campus. We didn't talk about climate change, but as you can tell from the remarks introducing me, I worked with IPCC and climate change for a number of years. And I'm really honored to have students participate in this conference. As you'll hear later, students are key to addressing a lot of the issues that we're exploring, both in my talk as well as in the talks you'll hear over the next 3 days. Let's see. Yeah, I think, as you can see from the title, Evaluation of Energy Policies and Programs in the Asia Pacific Region, looking at the current status, challenges, and opportunities ahead. I've only had one working career, and that's been at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, again, since the late 1970s. And we have worked in a number of multidisciplinary activities, focusing on technologies, but I focus on more of the social and behavioral aspects, and you'll hear more about that as well. So I plan to, let's see, why can't I, oh, let's see, there. Here are the 4 topics I want to address. Evaluation of energy programs and policies, the impact of COVID-19 on the evaluation community, and particularly the research that goes on. And then how, the third topic is strengthening the evaluation community in the Asia Pacific, and an update on this organization I help organize called EEAP, Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific, and then a relatively new activity that has started this year called Eval for Action. And I think particularly students will be very interested in this. So the first topic, evaluation of energy programs and policies. Well, why do we evaluate? I realize not a lot of people listening are involved in the evaluation community or industry. So I wanted to give you sort of a macro perspective and then focus on some recent news on evaluation. So we need to reduce uncertainty. And as everyone who works in any of your professional areas, you're dealing with uncertainty all the time in trying to make decisions. And so important key information is needed to make those good decisions. And for us, we've been focusing on programs, policies. And so we need to know what works and what doesn't, and how it can be improved. And we're also, when you do the evaluation, you looked at what we call the untapped opportunities, things that might have been overlooked, but when you're conducting the evaluation, you find out, oh, certain areas could be explored and invested later on. A major part of evaluation looks at what we call impact evaluation. We assess the impacts of programs and policies. So if you have a building in your university there that participates in one of the utility programs, you'd like to know how much energy usage was decreased due to energy efficiency, or perhaps you've produced renewable energy from some solar photovoltaics through programs as well as policies. And the third aspect is improving program and policy design. And this is the thrust of what we call policy evaluation, which for me is just as important as impact evaluation. And through policy evaluation, you find out who's participating in a program, why aren't people participating in a program, how is the program being implemented, and so on. And then you can identify key policies, prioritize budgets, and inform both resource planners and policymakers on what the next steps should be. But why is evaluation important in Asia Pacific? Well, as many of you know who are involved, looks like in environmental areas, climate change, as well as improving air quality in local cities like Bangkok, economies are developing, implementing new energy policies and programs to address these issues. And what we hope is that evaluation can then be part of the process in developing these policies as well as implementing, that resources can be devoted to increasing expertise in the public and private sector for data gathering and analysis, that we can access private sector energy investments toward policy goals, because one of the big errors people have is just relying on one entity for solving their problems. So government will not be solving all of our problems, nor the private sector, but trying to leverage both the investments in the private sector will be very helpful. And then the evaluation will help increase the knowledge on the effects of energy policies and programs and improve policy and program design and implementation. And then we can share this information and knowledge with others. And I'll add some more information later on that. So I wanted then, that was sort of the big perspective on evaluation. I want to focus on an evaluation project that I'm currently doing with a group called APEC, and I have the feeling many of you know APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Organization, that's all over Asia, and they fund very good activities, including my own, Actually have a second project with it, and the second project started in late last year, and we prepared earlier this year white paper on evaluation. I'll give you some results that haven't been shared widely yet. We were planning actually to talk about the white paper and have a workshop in Bali this month. But for the reasons we've heard earlier, we decided to postpone it to next year rather than hold it virtually, because the focus of this workshop is on what we call capacity building. And I'll mention that later in the slides. And with capacity building, a virtual workshop wouldn't be as good. So this white paper on evaluation, we conducted a survey earlier this year, and it was sent to experts in all the APEC member economies, as well as an expert group on energy efficiency and conservation, expert group on new and renewable energy, and an energy working group members. 26 surveys were completed from 15 of the 21 economies and 6 of the 11 developing economies. Now, I'm not sure if you can see this, probably people looking on their computer can, but in a large conference room, not sure. But this is sort of highlighting what we found for each of the economies on the left side, and whether evaluation was required and where it was required, whether it was related to policies, related to policies, to industry, appliances, building codes, transportation, or renewable energy. So what did we find? The main areas of evaluation activity were related to programs and policies involving energy efficient lighting, both residential and commercial in particular, electrical appliances, as you can imagine, air conditioning, refrigerators, and so on, energy efficiency in industry, and renewable energy. Now, we were able to compare the results for this survey to the one we held conducted in 2017. And in both surveys, 7 economies reported. We found that China, Indonesia, and Thailand now require evaluation to cover more policy areas than a few years ago. New Zealand requires fewer policy areas. Private sector involvement, we found again, Chile, Indonesia, and Malaysia had more private sector involvement in evaluation. New Zealand had less private sector involvement. There are no changes in the other economies. Sorry about this. One of my sons. Okay. Again, comparing the 2 surveys, respondents from more economies recognized barriers to women's participation in evaluation, and more economies were evaluating the impact of energy policies on women. I'm trying to delete this phone. Hold on.
I don't know what that means.
There. And then the evaluation of renewable energy programs were not asked in the first survey, but 5 of the 12 member economies were conducting evaluation in this field. So as some of you may know, renewable energy has progressed more and more each year, and there's more interest and more funding of these programs. Again, 40 years ago, when I was giving my first conference presentation, my first presentation was on renewable energy technologies. So I'm glad to see more interest now going up at the program and policy level. So that's what sort of my impressions of evaluation this year. Now, how has the impact of COVID-19 affected evaluation? I like to say it's made the invisible visible, and meaning that there are things that nobody talked about and were kept in the dark. But this virus, because of its different ramifications, has made that visible, and I'll explain that. One of the key things is different perspectives and frameworks that were sort of isolated from one another, now that intersect. So I'm in particular, it shines a bright light on what we call the socioeconomic determinants of health. And now we look at social equity, including racism and politics, including environmental issues, including carbon emissions, and sustainability. And the question is, are we in a new normal, and has there been a paradigm shift? Or when this is all over, whenever that is, will we go back to what it was before? I have a feeling it will be different. I'm not sure if it'll be a complete paradigm shift, but I think it's definitely initiated a lot of integration among the different perspectives, and where teams from different universities, laboratories are now working together, which is a big plus. Other lessons learned: things that we thought maybe were politically impossible can become possible overnight. And I'm sure you've seen that in Thailand and other Asian countries as well. Things where people have to wear masks all the time. People where bars are closed at certain hours, where people cannot go into office buildings. They have to try to continue the work they've been doing. And they have to a certain extent. The other thing we've learned, as I mentioned earlier, frameworks can be integrated and silos can be broken. And over the years, I've talked about silos and how they need to be broken. So even energy efficiency, renewable energy are two different silos. People were talking together to see how they can be integrated, particularly with the grid. Now we talk about public health and education in schools and resources to see how they could be integrated and addressed. So I find that very heartwarming. And we need multiple foci analysis. So instead of looking at one type of perspective, say what is going on in one country, say Thailand, let's look at it globally or even regionally, or within Thailand, different neighborhoods, how are they responding? And I think this has been important for people becoming more aware of these different perspectives, where before they might have focused on just one perspective. And then out of all this, I think there are opportunities for investing in people through education and healthcare. Innovative technologies are going to be needed in all sectors, and investing in infrastructure. We see there's more resources are needed in homes, factories, commercial buildings, and I can go on. So I want to focus now on the challenges to energy program implementers and evaluators. And I have to emphasize this is a US perspective. I have been following what's going on around the world, but more closely in the US. So this may or may not occur in your country, but this is what's happening here. I thought you might be interested in the US experience. I'm not saying it's a role model for anybody, but I think you'll find it of interest. So, not surprisingly, energy programs have been shut down or in some cases delayed and paused. So for example, we often rely on what we call in-home energy audits, where people could come to somebody's house and do an audit to see what kind of, say, energy efficiency technologies you have or don't have. And other in-person work in commercial buildings and office buildings, looking at whether they've installed these measures. So that's one issue. Related is there's been a lot of financial hardships for customers. Those who were thinking of investing in energy efficiency or renewable energy, they've delayed that and they're thinking about it. Whether they make the decision to come back is still unclear. And as a result, the clean energy workforce in the US lost over 600,000 jobs from March to May of this year. And I haven't seen any more recent news, and I'm sure it's gone up. Again, for implementers, they've had to look at alternate strategies to engage customers. So how do you get them to be more involved in participating in a program, for example, particularly if you're not knocking on their door? So you need to provide energy efficiency tips, promote self-installation, if possible, of some energy efficiency measures or renewable energy measures, and provide virtual audits. And I'll get back to that shortly. And then in some cases, some of the implementers of programs are increasing incentive levels. So people may, from a financial perspective, make the decision to invest. Well, how about for the evaluation community? What have been the challenges? And this has, of course, been more central to me. So we've mentioned delayed energy programs. What has been the impact? Well, you can imagine that there have been a lot of changes in the assumptions and more uncertainty. So how many people will participate in a program? A lot less than you had assumed. What will the energy use be? Particularly in offices, that'll be a lot less since people were working at home, but home energy use might go up. And so energy savings and renewable energy production might be quite different than what one had assumed. So are these programs, the 2020 programs, worth evaluating? Or should we focus on future programs? And that's what people are deliberating right now, particularly as this pandemic continues. Many of us thought this would be sort of like a flu. You'll have a flu season, and after a month or two, we go back to what we normally do. But this is quite different, as the president mentioned earlier. Nobody's ever seen something like this before in my career, as well as even before that. So another challenge, difficulty in contacting program participants at the workplace. So if you have a program looking in commercial buildings or office buildings and trying to put it in lighting, the people aren't there, they're working at home. So it's very difficult contacting them. How do you reach out? Trying to do that through web surveys and email, sometimes that seems to be more effective than contacting them through phone. More challenges, as you can imagine, site visits to these participants, either in the residential, commercial, and industrial sector are just not allowed or very limited. So then we have to look at other options for figuring out, again, how much energy is being saved or renewable energy produced. In some cases, we do what's called desk reviews. So imagine you're at your desk and you're looking at whatever paper track you have and use. In other cases, you can model buildings and simulate the what if. So before energy efficiency measures are introduced, how much energy is being used, and then you put a new energy efficiency measure in and see how much energy is produced and look at the difference. You can also look at historical data and then hope and think, now how does that relate to today? Again, a lot of assumptions go into figuring out consumption and renewable energy production. You can also rely on phone interviews or do virtual site visits. So you can do that by talking to somebody at a particular site, say in an office building, and there's a facility manager, and perhaps they can help. And they can also take pictures. So, and I mentioned pictures because there are certain data needs the evaluator needs. Sometimes you need to find out what is the power being used by some of these technologies. And you can encourage those facility staff or others on site to measure for you. Or you can have remote smart metering or some building automation systems. Again, visual verification of installations if somebody's there. You may not be able to see it, but they can take a picture and say, yeah, we did install this high efficiency air conditioner and here it is. And then we can also rely on sort of more problematic, but often used deemed or stipulated savings, where we know after 30 plus years of doing this, if we put in a new energy efficient air conditioner for an old one, we have a pretty good guesstimate of how much savings will occur. And then finally, we can rely on prior evaluations if they were conducted. Say, again, using office building, there might have been an evaluation of a similar technology in an office building and use those. And then challenges to energy evaluators, the last slide for this. Some businesses, and particularly in the US, the retail businesses have been closed, either temporary or permanently. And now people working at home. So again, there are going to be changes in the baseline of what we're comparing to, both in consumption and peak demand patterns, leading to uncertain future baselines. And then of course, there'll be changes in cost effectiveness and program performance. So if you remember my first slide about why we need evaluation to reduce uncertainty, given all I have said, we really need good evaluation. So going forward, what can evaluators and the evaluation community expect? Well, plan for unexpected delays like what we've had this year. Nobody had thought this was going to happen. Use not just one method for data collection, but a diversity of methods. Account for changes in behavior because people are changing their behavior, either not working at the office, or trying to spend more of your time at home, but also if you have kids, dealing with them as well. So it's quite interesting in that respect. The level of precision may need to be changed. We often have required pretty strict levels of precision using 95% confidence levels. We may have to relax that because of all the problems and challenges I mentioned I've reported on. And then be prepared to report on, or if you're a policymaker, receive disappointing results. Therefore, don't judge the value of a program just by 2020 results. If it's the first time, be lenient. If this program has been running for a few years, look at the previous results and hope for better results. And then, given what I mentioned earlier about the different perspectives that are needed, in particular, examine more closely the impacts on the most vulnerable communities. And we've seen that. I mentioned the invisible is now visible. We're learning more and more about vulnerability of households and communities. And what can we learn from the evaluation to help and service them? And that's where the process evaluation comes in. Let's see, how are we doing? Oh, how are we doing for time? Okay. Strengthening the evaluation community in Asia Pacific. I want to give you an update on EEAP. I mentioned that earlier, the Energy Evaluation Asia Pacific organization, and it was established in 2018. It's taking a leadership role in expanding the practice of and capacity for objective evaluation in the energy efficiency and renewable energy program and policy arena. We use workshops, conferences, websites, webinars, and other tools to foster the development of self-sustaining evaluation. We have a planning committee and evaluation ambassadors from many countries. And you can see this here. We're covering a lot of Asia as well as Asia Pacific. I'm going to skip over this. Well, I won't. Evaluation experience is often limited. The government initiatives, and you'll hear more about investment initiatives, don't include evaluation. So when we're responding to the pandemic, I hope some resources can be devoted to evaluation, because a lot of the plans will focus mainly on implementation. And the funding of data and collection evaluation is not available or low priority. Let's make it a high priority. Evaluation expertise is limited. We hope this organization can help in that respect. And evaluation data are lacking or not standardized. I've spent probably an hour on this figure alone. It's what we call evaluation capacity, and it's a multidisciplinary model. Briefly, on the left side, the big circle deals with developing evaluation knowledge, skills, and attitudes. Building that, then we transfer that into something more sustainable for an evaluation practice and developing a strategic plan, evaluation policies and procedures, and sharing evaluation beliefs and commitments. And then hopefully through leadership and developing the systems and structures and the culture, we can then diffuse that all around Asia Pacific. So you can see on this slide, a number of activities were conducted both in 2018 and 2019, again, focusing on conference presentations and webinars. We have a number of sponsors who've been very helpful in supporting our activities over the years, and we hope to build on that and get additional people to help. This year and next year, we're expanding our program committee. We're planning to conduct more workshops and more webinars. We hope to get more people to use our website, more activity, and we are thinking of planning for 2021 conference. It's still undecided. And then, of course, we want to work with select countries on evaluation, develop stronger linkages with both with energy and non-energy evaluation organizations in the Asia Pacific. So I hope you can join us. And if you're interested, I know the slides will be made available later. You can click on this and register, as well as when you go to the website, you can contact ambassadors in the program committee to learn more. I know I'm running short. This is the last topic area. I can go really quickly, called Eval for Action. And one of the things I've been focusing on the last 5 years is what's called the Sustainable Development Goals, approved by the UN General Assembly in 2015, and it underpins the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. You can see there's 17 goals. Number 7 is dealing with energy efficiency, and clean energy. But if you're interested in poverty or good health or gender equality or water, climate action, they're all being addressed. Again, briefly in my talk on this, they're integrated. It's very challenging from an evaluator to see how you can get those communities participate, but we're working on it. So there is this new effort started this year called the Decade of Evaluation for Action. As I mentioned, this next 10 years is key. So it's eval for action. You can contact any of these at the bottom of the slide, organizations or Twitter or email. And it's a campaign that supports the Decade of Action. It promotes widespread recognition of evaluation as a critical driver and accelerator for achieving the SDGs. And with hopes it'll lead to stronger evaluation systems and capacities. Only 10 years are left to achieve, and strong evaluation has the highest multiplier effect. And as I mentioned, evaluations provide the evidence for what works, under what circumstances and why, and what could be done better to ensure no one is left behind. So people or organizations around the world are committing to what we call influential evaluation, and also young evaluators. And there's a group of young evaluators, a global group, and particularly for students, if you're interested at all in the SDGs and particularly evaluation, I strongly recommend that you reach out to them. Here's briefly my contact information, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I know I rushed through it, but I am hoping that the slides will be made available later so you can look at it later. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Edward Vine, for a very, very interesting and a thought-provoking note about energy evaluation. We have checked with the chat. There have been no questions, but anybody in the floor has any questions? If not, maybe on their behalf, I would like to ask one question, which is about, based on your experience on the evaluation of energy policies, both in the Asia Pacific and elsewhere, and the way you have evaluated, which are the ones which was most effective, and why it was so? Maybe very briefly, if you can highlight that.
Just in general, in terms of my own experience, that's a good question. I'd have to give it some more thought. But we've had a number of programs that have evaluated, for example, lighting in both residential and commercial and industrial, and particularly new technologies. So at the time, as I said, I've been in this field for a while. So CFLs, compact fluorescent lights or lamps, were the new technology, and people were very reluctant to install them in their houses. And lo and behold, after the evaluations came out and showed that these technologies were saving, they were cost effective, the market has responded and put in CFLs. We've seen now the second wave with LEDs, right? And the LEDs in some cases now are the technology. And so you really don't even need programs or even often rebates. So we're still having some incentives for people installing LEDs because they're still relatively more expensive compared to CFLs, or, well, we don't even have incandescent lights now. They're not being sold. So I would say from an evaluation perspective, that's been really heartwarming to see that. And we can also see something complementary with building codes and what goes into buildings. And after evaluations, that have shown how energy efficiency measures work and save energy. The building codes in states in particular have been changed, so they include these new technologies where before they weren't sure. So that's why it's really important when people were conducting evaluations to see and reach out to the policymakers to find out what their questions are and how they can be involved or how they want to be involved and informed, so that later when the results from an evaluation come out, they can be fed into that policy making process. Because the worst thing for an evaluator is to do a great evaluation and then file it away. In the old days, they were paper evaluations, so we really literally filed away in a filing cabinet. But now, even with an electronic file, they won't see the day of light and people won't know about it unless you really interact strongly with program and policymakers.
Thank you very much. I think we are running out of time because we have so I would like to thank you on behalf of all participants, especially you're quite late in California now. I would like to request all members here to give a big hand to Dr. Edward Bryan for his very nice presentation. Thank you.
And thank you, and good luck for the next 3 days. I'll be signing off.
Thank you very much. So we will now close this session and then go for a coffee break. And then we come back in about 15 minutes at 10:20 for the first session. Thank you very much.
All right, we'll now have a break and please be back at 10:20. Meanwhile, please enjoy our video from our sponsor. Thank you.
Eco Group has earnestly invested in power business in Thailand and the Asia-Pacific region, as well as other related power businesses, which partly enhance the power security. Through these 20 years from the first day until now, many stories to be shared. Eco Group's vision is to be a major sustainable Thai energy company with full commitment to environment protection and social development support. Eco Group has a mission to secure continuous growth in order to maximize shareholders' value, to offer reliable energy supply and services, to be a good corporate citizen, and be considerate to society and environment.
บริษัทผลิตไฟฟ้าจำกัดมหาชนเป็นการแปรรูปมาจากโรงไฟฟ้าของการไฟฟ้าฝ่ายผลิตแห่งประเทศไทยในปี 2535 จดทะเบียนเป็นบริษัทมหาชนในปี 2537 เข้าสู่ตลาดหลักทรัพย์แห่งประเทศไทยเมื่อต้นปี 2530